Good evening, and who are we here with today?
So you're here with Richard Powell.
Richard Powell, and where are you from? And can I get a little background information on you, please?
Okay, so I'm originally from Jamaica, the island, West Indies, and I was raised in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay,
So
cool.
I grew up in Brooklyn, and then I joined the military around 20 years old. Did 20 years, retired from the military, and I currently live in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay, thank you. And what will be a little summary of what you do, how you run, what things that you do, I guess, around New Orleans.
Okay, right now I am a property owner and a real estate investor in New Orleans. I also currently hold a full-time job. But for the most part, real estate, property management is my main focus right now while I'm in New Orleans. So that's my current occupation, I would say.
Okay. And how long do you think how long have you been renting properties?
It's been about since 2015 is when I purchased my first property in New Orleans. And ever since then, I've accumulated about three more properties and total of 8 units.
Okay, so getting into the properties, what type of tenants do you usually rent to, or do you see more of?
So right now the market is very up and down. So, you have long term, like we'll categorize it as like long term tenants that's looking to lease for like a year or more. And then you have like short term tenants that are anywhere from like 3 to 6 months to up to a year. And then you have or even shorter term tenants, Airbnbs that just want to do like for a weekend or for a month. So it's broken down into those categories. Currently now, my properties, I have long term tenants, which are families that are looking to rent for more than a year. And I have short term tenants where I rent to students within a local area, and I rent out each room. Now, those tenants are pretty much anywhere from, it'll either go semester at a time or they may extend it past the semester. So we're looking at anywhere from like 8 months to a year, which could go probably, 2 years to include the semester, the off seasons, the summer. They may rent for the summer, or I may get short term tenants that may just want a room just for the summer break. Yeah, but that's my focus is both long term and short term tenants.
Okay. And the properties that you have, and I guess we could just do the ones on our street since it's more local to us. How would you describe the properties compared to others in the area, like budget, mid-range, luxury, things like that?
Okay, so the properties in the area right now are more middle class. As you can see, our block or the block that the properties are located on is more family oriented, working class, um, middle age, anywhere from like late 20s to mid to late 30s. Family, we're talking about husband, wife, children, young adults, young children, and also students. So, we're looking at like more working class tenants, students that are, currently active in school or working to pursue something, and they're just in the area for whether it be education, whether it be experience. They're doing, internships at the hospital. So, I'm open to that.
Thank you. Okay, so when we're not gonna get into how much rent is and nothing like that, but when you decide to like charge for rent based on properties or families or whatnot, etc., what main things do you think about, or what main things go first when pricing you're charging, or how much you want to charge to who, etc. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So one of the big things I look at, first of all, is like, will I live there? I'll put myself in that situation. And then I think to myself, if I was a tenant, what would be the amenities that I would look for? And so I try to present that. So the main thing is security, being in a safe location, a safe environment. Um, Also the location, what is it close to? stores, restaurants, highways. Those would be like convenient. We look at the location, like what's convenient in the area. So for me now, I base my prices off of those things. In our area, for example, right down the block is the precinct. We got Fourth District precinct, so that provides a level of security and safety. Plus, we're pretty much adjacent to the campus Xavier, and they have their campus security. So that's almost like another level of security. So that creates a safe environment. Then also the proximity of where the location is to, downtown area, to the highway, to the schools, to the stores. I don't want it to, because of it's located close to these things. That's like an added bonus also. So I take all of that into consideration. I take like the amount of family members. I don't want it overcrowded because then things can get crazy. So I price it accordingly to the family. With working class family, students, and that's how I kind of like look and see. It's not just the rooms that I provide, but also what's in proximation of it, which is also a bonus.
Thank you. Okay, and getting into a different side of the renting of properties and everything like that, are there any laws, city rules, or tenant protections that affects how you set rent or how you rent to people?
I pretty much keep it standard as far as what the going rate is now for rental properties, especially like I said, you have your long term, you have your short term, you have even shorter term, shorter rentals. So I try to keep it reasonable as far as now the economy is kind of like all over the place. I don't want people to go into a lease and then 3 months down the line they can't pay the rent because now I'm stuck with the bag, and that causes a whole lot of other issues down the line to where I can't just immediately try to evict someone if they miss 1 month's rent, maybe even 2 months rent, because that's a process within itself. I can't just change the locks on someone. So I try to keep it reasonable. Try to like see how the economy's going. Try to make my rental prices. It's still a competitive business out there. You know what I mean? So I try to make the prices reasonable, and I throw in a lot of the bennies on it as far as the approximation, location, and the security, which it gives me an advantage. Because students right there within walking distance. Families precinct is right down the block, so it makes it safer for the kids to be outside and play without having to worry about crime or anything else going on in the city. So
Okay. And I just have two more questions for you. So one would be,
okay,
if you could change anything about how rent pricing works or just renting in general, what would you be? What would it be?
if I could change one thing about rent prices, to have it basically standard, because in the city now, different areas charge a different rent based on that area. So we live in like an area called Gertown, and then about a half a mile down, you got Mid City. Now Mid City is a more upper class than Gertown, so Mid City will be able to charge more rent. And we're just almost like a block apart, but because it's in that location, they can up the rent because of the reputation that that part of the city has compared to the reputation where I have. So if everything was just standard across the city, without the prices going up and down, just from being across the street, I would rather like that. That would be easier to kind of like
I
deal
got
with
you.
tenants and the inventory of people looking for places to stay.
Okay, thank you. And the last question: what advice would you give someone starting a rental property business?
Biggest thing is um, the property that you look at. Make sure that you go through your inspections. Like if you have a property that you're interested in renting, like I said before, your location is gonna always be key. You don't want it in like a shady neighborhood. You want it in a neighborhood that's like pretty active, close in proximity with stores, shopping areas, highways. You're looking for a level of security in that area. So look at those things. Look at upcoming neighborhoods, and check the rent rate so you can know that where you're looking to purchase your property. It's in an area that charges 2 bedrooms for this amount, 3 bedrooms for this amount, and then you can gauge your price and go from there. So do your due diligence, do your research on the property, make sure that you get all the inspections, make sure that there's nothing crazy that may come down the line. So that's my biggest advice.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Richards. I appreciate your time.
All right.